Good morning, everyone. And if you're in the lobby and you can hear me and you're planning on coming inside, this is the time to come inside to Barrows. Day 2 of the Wheaton Theology Conference is underway, Bonhoeffer, Christ and Culture. A very full day. We've made a slight adjustment to the program, as you know, and we have a bit of time for discussion, dialogue, question now with Uwe Steinmetz and about his piece that so many of you heard yesterday, and then at 9:15 Dan Trier's presentation begins, to be followed by a chapel break, and the chapel service will be shown here in Barrows on a big screen. Charles Marsh, our speaker at the conference tonight, is the chapel speaker. I'll be introducing him over in chapel. So if you wish to go over to Edmund Chapel, that's fine at chapel time, or you can stay here and watch it on the big screen. So for now, we've got a chance for a little bit of unplanned but now available time for dialogue with Uwe about his piece, which you heard, so come on up. It doesn't need much introduction other than such a wonderful friend and Christian brother and fantastic musician as you have experienced over the last few days. Let me ask you one question about the piece yesterday, and then we'll see what those of you who heard it are interested in asking or talking about with regard to the piece. What was it that drew you to work up a piece related to Bonhoeffer's prison poems? There's so much material for a person to compose around. What was it? And very engaging poetry, but not exactly lighthearted. So what was it that drew you into the project of working with his prison poetry?
Yeah, I think there were two. Good morning. I think two things. Bonhoeffer was very shy about writing poetry, since he didn't do that before. And I remember in lots of his letters he makes a reference to Ebert Bethke. This is a try. This is a test version of a poem. What do you think about it? Now, I think the stay in the United States inspired him to look for ways of creative expression. He was very well trained in classical music. He was very well read, of course, as we heard yesterday as well. But there was this chance in this isolated situation, without any piano, without any possibility for chamber music, to come up with an original expression of all of his thoughts, of his theology and also his emotions. And that struck me. That's actually a fantastic source to combine that with jazz, as jazz doesn't aim to be perfect. It doesn't aim to be the poem. It doesn't aim to be the music. So this combination seemed to be ideal for me. So anyhow, please get out your tomatoes and start throwing in my direction.
So I'd be interested in opening it up to you folk in terms of your comments, observations, questions about what you heard and about the way that that piece came together to engage with his poetry. Yeah. Is it available for purchase?
It is, yes. I had 100 CDs shipped here in request of the bookshop, and so it's outside. I'm glad. Thank you very much. Yeah. So.
And a couple of other your CDs too.
Yes, right. So. Yes.
When you did the original composition, was everything in German, or it kind of was just rough?
No, that's right. It was in German, and we did a CD in 2005 with the wife of Lauren Mazel, die Linde Turban, who's actually German originally. And she got very interested in the project, so she had a friend from New York, Christopher Rothwell, speaking the poems in English. And we put it together as a double CD. So the CD is actually in German and in English. And the little thing that happened in the beginning yesterday and in the end is on the CD, vice versa. So the CD starts in German with German and English and ends in German and English and then in English and German. The idea was with Dietlinde that Bonhoeffer's poems were also directed towards Maria von Wedemeyer, and we wanted to have two layers. Maria reading poems from Bonhoeffer, and I hope maybe something like this came through yesterday, that Maria is questioning the things in the beginning when she reads Freedom. I assume it's a very harsh language, and I wanted to have a little bit of a contrast between the reception of a poem and the reading. I've later on staged the piece for speaking choir. I do this a lot in churches or with schools. And with a choir, it's even more interesting to work on these different levels, of have one side of the choir being the determined writer of a poem, or questioning writer, and then the recipient, the reader of the poem. So.
Yeah. So a little bit off, but you are a Christian, you live in Germany, and Bonhoeffer was so concerned about the state of the Christian church in Germany after the war. And that, can you tell me what is the state of the Christian church post World War II?
Well, it's diverse. There's not much Christ-centeredness in German theology, as you possibly know. So to be Christ-centered seems to be old-fashioned, usually. I'm a little bit polemic, but I can allow that because I live in Germany. And if you travel to Tübingen or Heidelberg, you will see what I mean. And that causes a problem also in the perception of Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer and Karl Barth, even Martin Luther, funnily enough, are watched sometimes as people that are a little bit old-fashioned because they center so much on the biblical word and so much on actually Christ being with us in our lives. The former Bishop Huber did a great initiative in Germany from the Lutheran Church to have this decade of Reformation. And that's an exciting process where lots of the people come together now who were also involved in the DDR resistance, who are usually very outspoken believers, including the now president of Germany, Joachim Gauck. So there's possibly a change. But until it reaches the highly established, non-believing secular universities where theologians are educated, it might take another 50 years. So.
Yeah, although I've been reading Bonhoeffer for a couple decades, I often just, when I see his poetry, I skip it. I'll admit I don't have much appreciation. And I wanted to say after your presentation, it was very moving. And I have a whole new appreciation for his poetry. And now a much deeper interest in reading it and understanding and taking the time. And so I just, it's kind of reminded me of being back as an undergrad and taking a class in music appreciation that gave me a whole new appreciation for classical. This gave me a whole new appreciation for his poetry. And I'm thankful, so thank you.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
A question, who did the translations? I was interested in number 6, success and failure, and Glück and Unglück. To me, fortune and misfortune or something like that might be a better translation. For me as an American, success is something I do.
Right.
I achieve something,
yeah.
and yet it seemed more Glück and Unglück are sort of fate-driven. And so I was just wondering, curious about that particular choice of.
I fully agree. I mean, I took all of these translations that were handed out from a book that was done by someone who spent time with Bonhoeffer, and that's the so-called authorized version. But I would agree on this, because in German as well, Unglück, and it's like fate. You never think about it's your own success.
Right.
In that sense, yeah. It's a very good thing. Thank you. So let me just say that I'm very encouraged by a Bonhoeffer conference taking place here and in the United States. And we had a good time talking a little bit about the reality that in Europe we don't have faith-based schools. So the education is very different, and there's not so much something like a vision for a university like Humboldt University in Berlin, where Bonhoeffer was involved as well. It seems to be nearly idealistic to propose a vision for Humboldt University actually these days. So I live in a very different society as all the people live in Europe, and I appreciate very much that you take such an interest in Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and with this an interest in the past in Germany. That's very encouraging for me and very inspiring. So thank you.
We also sometimes read Barth, and I was wondering, did Barth ever substantively comment on the death of Bonhoeffer?
Well, I wouldn't be the right person to ask that question, I think. I don't know, honestly.
If anybody knows that,
I'm
see
sure
me later.
Mr. Ziegler.
I've just wondered about that because I've looked and read a bit of Barth, which means probably 1/10.
Right.
But I can't find that. I know that they were certainly mutually very respectful and helpful to each other.
Right.
But I haven't.
Phil Ziegler, are you in the room?
He would know.
Anyway, thanks.
Maybe he's in the lobby. Oh, he is in the room. Do you have an answer? Or you or Stephen have an answer to that? Theology is being done in community now.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I don't recall, apart from personal remarks about the death, I don't recall extended discussion in Barth's writing about the death. What there are, though, are extended treatments that Barth offers on particular works of Bonhoeffer, especially in the final volumes of the Dogmatics. So in the 4 volumes in Volume 4. So, for instance, and some of it's quite remarkable. Barth's very appreciative of the ethics fragments, and finds the approach there extraordinarily congenial in all kinds of ways. When he gets to treat the section on discipleship in the 4th volume of the Dogmatics, there's a extended one of those small print footnotes that he was so well known for, that simply says, I shouldn't bother to write this section, I should just go tell you to go and read Bonhoeffer's Discipleship because there's nothing else to say. Although that he writes a 50-page treatise on discipleship. There's a famous letter of Barth's to a Lutheran superintendent, reflecting on the letters and papers from prison, and Barth expresses some deep reservations about taking those what he considers fragmentary experimental texts as if they were a sort of arrived at mature position, and he worries out loud about not really being able himself, he says, to fathom what Bonhoeffer's up to in some of those fragments, especially the critical comments about the so-called positivism of revelation, which he lays at Barth's door. So those 3 extended comments are probably the most substantive ones. Yeah, sorry.
Great. Yeah, over here.
You talked a little bit about how the church is viewed as old-fashioned in Germany. Can you talk a little bit about the church's involvement in the music scene in Germany today?
Yeah, this decade of Reformation from Bishop Huber actually led to an interesting series. So we are now in Germany in the Year of Music. And it means there's one initiative that each day there's a concert in one church in Germany. There's a webcast, of course, for this with modern technology. And there's a book traveling along this journey. So we have 366 concerts this year, particularly done on the theme of Reformation. And that's an exciting thing. They commission lots of artists in Germany. They engage lots of secular artists, secular choirs, and the church communities get strengthened by just doing things together in one region. That's one of these projects where I feel there's some hope. We have, the church musicians in Germany have fought for many years to be separate from the theological institutions. And the main debate in Germany now is in these conferences that take place to bridge these institutions again, because we have church music schools for organists, for choir directors, not for any other instruments. So, for example, I couldn't study there. It's not for composition, it's not for saxophone or something like this. And then we have the theological schools, which are not faith-based schools, of course, and a few seminaries. So during this time, of course, you have a huge gap between the practicing church musician who comes to work in a church and the theologian who is educated in another institution. And this creates lots of problems. It's a very different scene here where you actually have a fellowship between usually the choir directors, the worship leaders, and the pastors. So the state church in Germany tries to recreate these connections again, which means a huge institutional initiative. And I'm interested how it works out. One of the proofs that we have is that the hymns that come up, the new hymns, they were all written by people who lived in spiritual communities within a church. One of the most recent movements is These, an ecumenical movement. But in Germany, the hymns that were written in the resistance against the DDR regime, they are wonderful hymns, and they are just very recent. You know, it's only 25 years ago. And they came out of a living spiritual community within the Lutheran Church. So there's an awareness that you actually need spiritual communities. You just can't give some money to some composers to write hymns. In order to make them lively, you actually need something which you got here, faith-based universities where people meet. So it's just a huge initiative, and it's exciting, but also sometimes a little bit discouraging, as there's lots of ignorance about what is actually done here. And I wish more people like Bonhoeffer would travel to the United States and enjoy being here and study. So you should come to Germany.
Well, thank you very much, Uwe, for being here. He'll be here throughout the day. Let's thank him.